Welcome back. Today we have a Kickstarter preview that celebrates the anniversary or the 150th anniversary of building the Transcontinental Railroad. This is called Pacific Rails Inc. from Vesuvius Media. It is a 2 to 4 player worker placement game that uses trains as the building blocks.
Yeah, it is a train game, but not a train game in the traditional sense. This is a worker placement game through and through, but you're also going to have some tile placement down on the lower half of the board where you're actually building that railroad across the country.
Now, as we say with any of these videos that we do, this is a Kickstarter preview. This is completely a prototype version that you see in front of you with a lot of 3D printed materials, uncut out chipboards. Make sure you guys go to the Kickstarter page to see the final components. But today we're going to kind of introduce to you the overall look at what the game is trying to accomplish. Now, as we said, you are trying to build the Transcontinental Railroad from the West Coast to the East Coast, or vice versa. Once these two lines meet, that's going to signify the end of the game. But leading up to that, you're going to be getting a lot of different victory points by doing different things with your train engine.
Yeah, now there's a lot of things going on the table right now. We can talk about that a little bit. We've got the main board, and like we said, there's two halves to this. There's the land down here where you're actually building your railroad, and then up here is going to be the worker placement portion of the game, along with some other things. And then, of course, we all have player boards that are represented by these trains here, and the trains are going to actually grow as you play the game, so it's going to enhance your powers throughout.
Now, just to kind of look at the spots a little bit more in detail, the bottom part of the board is broken into different types of terrain. Each of the players at the start of the game is going to place one of their railroads in reverse turn order on the west side of the board. This is going to be in one of these 4 different locations on the outside. And then starting in normal turn order, you're going to place them on the East Coast. So you could have someone starting up here, but wanting to finish in the bottom right-hand corner. It doesn't matter really where you start because the game can end anytime any of the railroads connect. And you're going to be moving your railroad systems into other players. Now, the top of the board is broken into city blocks. And as David alluded to, this is where all the worker placement spots take place. There are actually 9 different locations, but 10 actions because the center action represents 2 different things that you can do on your turn. On the right-hand side of the board, you're going to have a couple different areas too. One of them is going to be the Senate. That's where you're going to lobby the Senate to be able to do special actions. And then you have all your specialist costs. There are 4 different specialists in this game. You have the financier, you have the crew, you have the miners, and then you have the actual engineer himself. All of these are going to trigger when you take special actions and you have them on your board. But they're also going to trigger when you go to very specific areas because they can also kind of be foremen or the people that lead those special actions on your train. Now, as David alluded to, each of the players has a player board. As you said, these player boards are going to have your houses and your telegraphs. These are going to be placed onto the board with very specific actions, and these, again, are going to give you points through the course of the game.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. They play a couple different roles. The telegraphs, as you place them, they're going to go down on the lower half of the board, and they're going to reveal points as you do, so you're going to get those points immediately. The houses can be placed in a couple different locations. One, down here on the board as well, in fact, at each station or city, along with potentially another telegraph, or up here in the worker placement spots. There are some spots here that can be enhanced by placing one of your houses there, and when you do, you're allowed to take a little bit more on the resources front.
So the game is very simple to play. You're going to start with an X number of workers depending upon the number of players that you have. We have a 3-player game set up, meaning that each of us is going to have 4 workers to use on their turn. Now, you're only placing 1 worker on your turn. Now, the crux of this game is how you use your workers. The action spots aren't actually the action spots where you're going to be placing them. It's these little footmarks that you see around them. Each of these can hold 1 single worker, and when you place your worker, you're placing on one of these open areas. And then you're taking the action of one of the areas associated with that spot. So if I place here, I can take this action or this action. Now, the trick in this game is trying to get more actions out of each of these spots by having multipliers. And multipliers can come in one of 2 ways. One, if you place it in an area that has more than one of your guys around it, you can take more of those actions. So in this case, I can take the center action twice because I have 1 here and 1 here. But also you can spin what that's called cowboy hats, and you get these through various different actions. These can also be spent to be able to take additional multipliers, meaning you get to take more of those actions. Now, let's talk about each of these different action spots. We'll talk a little bit more about how you use them. There are 4 main basic types of actions. There are the collection actions, which are on the outsides. These are going to give you your 4 basic resources. You have wood, you have gunpowder, you have iron, you have coin. All of these are used to be able to build the railroads, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then you have your specialist actions on the outside. 3 of them which are going to allow you to actually build track.
Yeah, those spaces are going to let you take those resources that you have collected and typically build track out onto the board. And there's 3 different types of track. There's going to be track that goes over the grassland, ones that go through hills, and then ones that have bridges that go over the water. Now, there's another spot here. This is the financier spot. This is where you're lobbying Congress or Senate. So when you go here, you're actually going to spend coin to use this portion of the board over here. When you do that, you spend a coin. If you're just spending 1, you can move any of these first hats down and take the corresponding bonus. Then these 2 cost 2 coin and these cost 3 coin. Of course, you're going to have multiple pieces placed there or use cowboy hats to do that. The last thing you can do is spend a coin to actually reset all of those and accumulate all of the points that are underneath the hats on the top row.
And the final spot is in the center of the board. This actually has 2 different actions that you get to take during your turn. One of them is to actually buy specialists. Now, in order to have specialists, you have to have room on your train in order to hold those. Those are done with the carriages that you'll be able to collect through the course of the game by building some of these houses onto the board or train stations. These specialists are going to allow you to do special things through the course of the game. And again, they come in 4 different types, which I've already mentioned. They each have costs associated with them depending upon which one of your carriages they're attached to. You're going to have possible up to 3 different carriages, starting with 1, going to 2, and then going to 3, with their costs being incrementally more for the further on that train card that they are. The other thing you can do is you can actually lay the track that you've bought with these 3 actions that you've taken. Remember, anytime you buy these train pieces, you don't actually place them on the board immediately. They go into your collection, which you can then use this action to actually place them onto the board. Now, before I get into how to place them, let's talk about what your train can hold. You're only allowed to hold 6 pieces at any given time. That includes both your resources and your train pieces. So anytime you go over that limit, you have to actually discard them. However, that limit can go up to 15, and it's +3 for each one of these train carriages that you have through the course of the game. Let's come back to laying the actual track. Your whole goal in this game is to lay track, and what you're trying to do is build from one city to the next. And actually, anytime that you lay track on the board, it has to connect 2 cities. So you can't place 1 or 2 pieces at a time. You have to place as many pieces as it takes in order to connect 2 cities together. And those cities have to be connected with the right type of train tracks, which are gathered from these different spots. As David already alluded to, you have to have bridges, you have to have tunnels, you have to have just regular track in order to connect them. Connecting them is the big goal here. And anytime that you connect 2 cities, you're laying as many track as you possibly can on those types of terrains and then gathering points for the track that you lay. You're going to gain 2 points for connecting cities as long as they're the shortest connected area between them. For instance, if I were to start here on this area and lay this bridge here to connect this city, I get 2 points because it's the shortest path. Each city that you bypass and is not the connected, you're only getting 1 point for. But you may want to do that because you want to connect further out or block people from very specific paths. Then, once you connect that city, you have a choice. Do I want to take one of my train pieces or one of my house pieces off my train and lay it there? Or do I want to take one of my telegraphs and lay it into that spot? You immediately get victory points for the telegraphs that you lay. And your houses are going to actually be placed in these areas to give you additional resources anytime you go to these resource spots,
as well as giving you that carriage piece. So when you build your stations out on that map, you're going to get these carriage pieces, which, like Jeremy said, is going to allow you to hold more resources.
The first carriage piece that you get comes with a free specialist. Your second one is not going to come with anything, but again, each of these is going to give you 3 more resources, as you already alluded to. And you're going to keep doing this round after round. Now, you may ask yourself, what happens when the board becomes full of workers and you can't place anywhere? Well, there's 2 things that can happen here. You have a limited amount of resources depending upon the number of players. If a spot is completely blocked by other players, say for instance, this spot is completely blocked and the red player wanted to go into this location, well, he has a choice. He can place in the center of this, leaving his guy in there and then kicking all 4 of these surrounding guys back to that player's side of the board. Each player that gets one of their workers removed gets 1 cowboy hat for each of those spots. Now, you only have a place for 2 cowboy hats. Each one that you get over 2 is a free resource of your choice. So it's great to kind of block people out of those very particular spots. Now, if you're already on that spot, so say for instance, I really needed to take this spot, but I already have one of my guys here, you may ask how you get your workers back. Well, placing a guy or removing a guy takes the action of that spot. And in this case, since I can't place anyone here, I have to actually remove one of my guys from that spot, taking this action or this action. So it's this delicate balance between placing guys in the right area or removing guys from the right area or kicking people off, which you technically don't want to do because you're giving them free things, but there's times where you're going to have to do that.
Yeah, there is a really interesting balance when one of those spaces gets filled. In fact, these corner spots, which give you the resources, are going to get filled up with just 2 pieces. So once those are filled, you're either taking from there so you can get it, but again, you're probably only getting 1 resource, or booting everyone out. But again, giving those cowboy hats is a dangerous thing because they can be pretty powerful for the rest of the game.
There's a couple more things we need to mention. Number 1, each of these spots that are going to allow you to collect resources also have special actions associated with them. For instance, this spot here allows you to trade in some of that wood you have to place one of your houses on your train onto any of these spaces that can house houses. What these houses will do for you here instead of here is they're going to give you additional resources. So for instance, if I go to this area, I'm going to collect 1 barrel or more barrels depending upon what the multiplier I have on my board is, plus 1 additional barrel for each one of my houses in that location. So it's a really good way to collect resources even faster and to remove them from your board. And the game is going to end once one of those players is able to connect 2 of the sides of the board together. That player will get 15 points immediately by doing so. So again, there's some timing aspects in there. However, everyone at the table is going to be able to finish out that round. So if it's the first player that's able to do that, each of the other players is going to be able to have 1 more turn in order to gain some points at the end of the game. But there's some end game points as well.
Yeah, there's some end game points. You see this track right here. This is going to be related to all the telegraphs and houses that you have out on the board here. So you're just going to add all of those up, go across the top here, and then get the associated points below. And these points are significant.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to strike a balance between what you're putting out on here, what kind of points you're getting for your train tiles as you build them. And one thing to definitely keep in mind, Jeremy mentioned this earlier, you are not necessarily connecting your 2 trains. So I started here as the yellow player and down there, and as you can see, I'm not connected. But right here is where our game finished, where Ryan and Jeremy actually connected up their 2 tracks, which triggers the end of the game.
This is a super interesting game. Like the first time we played this, we didn't realize how much balance takes place in here. You really have to consider where you place your workers, the timing of those workers on them, which actions you want to take, where you want to build, which routes you want to take, because you're not going to have a large amount of resources in front of you at any given time. So you're going to be plotting down, maybe even blocking locations off from other players so you get some of those bonus actions. And then using the lobbying of the Congress is also really unique because you have a really good chance to gain points in those areas plus resources if you time your actions correctly.
Yeah, if someone lobbies Congress a few times and there's some points exposed, you can just go there once and grab 4 points. Or you could go there with a power of 2, do another action over there, and then reset them to get even more.
One of the other cool actions, too, is being able to use your train. Like, we didn't really mention that, but these 4 spots here allow you to activate your train. And anytime you go to these spots, not only do you get to gather the resources you need, like training iron into regular train tracks or using the lobbyist, but you get to also run your entire train, which is really cool because you get a form and action of that spot, plus each of the different specialists that you have in these locations will also allow you to basically take those same actions again. So if you have the right resources, you can kind of skip several turns ahead by doing multiple actions with 1 train run.
Yeah, we can't underscore that enough. The train is almost its own, no pun intended, engine that you're building down here to run through as much as you can. And there's a lot of decisions to make, not only with the specialists, but there's a space here where you can add cargo that adds particular types of resources, allow you to collect more resources so you can run through this train and get a lot of what you would normally accomplish out on the board done right here in front of you.
Yeah, I'm not a notorious train guy, but I like train games like this, like Russian railroads, that add kind of a Euro element to it, and this is definitely more of a Euro game than a train game. So that is Pacific Rails from Vesuvius Media. It is a 2 to 4 player game on Kickstarter right now. If you have any questions, make them in the comments below. Make sure you guys check out their Kickstarter page to see all the final components, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.